So, thank you for joining us today. This is actually our fifth gathering of Forest Talk, where we talk story about the plants and animals and all the cool things that we find in our native ʻŌhiʻa forests. Today, we welcome Dr. Dilek Sahin from Kauaʻi Endangered Seabird Recovery Project as our guest speaker. Her talk is titled ʻŌhiʻa Roots, Home for Kauaʻi's Endangered Seabirds. My name is Kim Rogers, and I'm an outreach specialist for Kauaʻi Invasive Species Commitment Committee. My focus is ʻŌhiʻa and protecting our native forest ecosystems from primarily rapid ʻŌhiʻa death, but there are other forest threats that we watch for as well. This is actually a multi-agency collaboration that includes KISC and NTBG, Kauaʻi DOFA, TNC, KRCP, and others who make regular surveys of our ʻŌhiʻa forests to monitor the health of Kauaʻi's watersheds. And as you've probably heard me say before, a healthy forest also helps ensure a healthy ocean reef. So a healthy forest is important to all of us. Before I turn things over to Dilek, though, a couple of requests and announcements. If you would make sure you're muted. And if you have questions at any time, if you would drop those in the Q&A. That should be a little icon along the bottom of your Zoom screen. That's just a little easier for me to find questions, especially if the chat starts getting a little chatty. We will and are recording this event, and the recording will go out likely early next week. There are other Forest Talk sessions that have been recorded and that can be viewed on our KISC YouTube page. Once I turn things over to Dilek, I will put the link for those in the chat. And I also would like to announce our next Forest Talk has been scheduled for Wednesday, October 29th, strategically a couple of days before Halloween, because this talk is titled Arachnophilia. Why you should love Hawaiian spiders this Halloween and all year round. Our speaker is Dr. Natalie Graham. She is a molecular ecologist and assistant professor of biology at the University of Hawaii at Hilo. Her talk's description that she gave me is Hawaiian spiders are incredibly diverse and full of surprises, from colorful leaf dwellers to web building specialists found only on single mountain tops. Her talk explores how these unique arachnids reveal patterns of evolution, ecology, and biodiversity across the Hawaiian archipelago. I've heard her speak a couple of times now, and I have to admit that I am a spider convert. So I will be dropping the link to the registration for that Forest Talk in the chat once I turn things over to Dilek. So let's talk seabirds. Ready? Here we go. Our guest presenter is Dr. Dilek Sahin with the Kauaʻi Endangered Seabird Recovery Project, also known as KESRP. Dilek is a seabird biologist with a strong background in conservation. She holds numerous degrees from various Turkish universities, including a Bachelor of Science degree in biology, a Master of Science in bird ecology, and a PhD in the conservation genomics of Mediterranean shearwaters. Dilek has worked on seabird conservation projects across Europe and for almost the past 4 years right here on Kauaʻi. Her work focuses on protecting endangered seabirds through research and management, predator control, biosecurity, reducing light pollution and fisheries bycatch, and encouraging behavior change to support seabird conservation. And so with that, I'm going to invite Dilek to take the stage and I will spotlight her. Are you good to go, Dilek?
Thank you. I am. I will share my screen. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for your interest and time today. Let's see. Everyone sees my good screen?
Correct.
With the best visuals?
Yep.
Best scenes from the mountains.
Beautiful forest scene. Thank you for that.
Exactly. That's our workspace. Thank you, Kim, for the introduction and for inviting me. It's really, it feels special to talk about seabirds and ʻŌhiʻa together because, as I will hopefully convince you in the end, they are really dependent on each other. So as Kim mentioned, I'm representing Kauaʻi Endangered Seabird Recovery Project, and we are related to University of Hawaii, but also related to the State Division of Forestry and Wildlife here. Okay, I'll start with our focal species today, ʻŌhiʻa and seabirds. And I would like to start with sharing some personal experience coming from the Mediterranean. So all my professional career studying seabirds, I worked on seabirds in the Mediterranean. And, you know, seabirds are seabirds. They live out in the ocean for the majority of their annual life. And then you find them in the Mediterranean on the sheer cliffs or on the boulder scree, on the offshore islands, or these sheer cliffs are right by the ocean. You never really go far inland. When I first moved to Kauaʻi to study seabirds here, it took me a really long time to really accept that I have to travel far inland to the mountains and to the forest, even on top of it, not just mountains, but to the forest in order to study these birds. It still amazes me every single day. And yeah, I'm happy to talk about it today. And hopefully after this talk, you will share that appreciation with me because I think it's amazing. As I mentioned, seabirds spend the majority of their life in the sea, in the ocean. They come to land only to nest. And in the case of Kauaʻi, this happened to be the interior mountains, the wet forest dominated by ʻŌhiʻa. So probably some of you know Hawaiian forests are relatively low species diversity and high dominance by single species. And ʻŌhiʻa is definitely the most abundant species in our forests here. It is such a flexible species. You can see the distribution of ʻŌhiʻa from the sea level to very high altitudes in several different soil types, in different temperatures, different habitats. So it's kind of unavoidable to see, I guess, ʻŌhiʻa everywhere in the Hawaiian forest. And also, it is expected that species will develop dependency on ʻŌhiʻa in their evolutionary timeline because this species, again, is dominating in our forest. And we are so lucky to have it because that forms the foundation for the habitat that many species, including seabirds, rely on. And these photographs we're looking at are the places that we work in. And on the left, you can see a detailed photo of the ʻŌhiʻa leaves. The hairy leaves help collecting the water above the ground and then manages that water. You know, the Hawaiian landscape is so wild and the climate's so harsh that that water runs off very quickly, even with the presence of ʻŌhiʻa. But ʻŌhiʻa helps keeping that water you know, kind of controlling it above the ground and also below underground with the roots. So it helps or not just creates a habitat, but also helps the watershed to stay alive. And switch to seabirds. We have 3 endangered seabird species on the Hawaiian Islands. All of them are endemic to the Hawaiian Islands at the species or subspecies level. But I will talk about 2 species here that are mostly found in ʻŌhiʻa forest in Hawaii, not just on Kauaʻi, but also on the other islands. And you can see the first species is ʻaʻo, and the second is uaʻu. You can see their distribution maps under each species photographs. And what we are looking at here is on the distribution map of ʻaʻo, you can see there are some small distribution zones on the other islands, especially Hawaii and Maui, but these populations are really small. Kauaʻi holds 90% of the global population of the ʻaʻo. That means if we lose the species from Kauaʻi, we're losing it globally almost. So that's really critical. We have an amazing responsibility, amazingly huge responsibility for the species here. On the other hand, uaʻu, we are holding as Kauaʻi one of the largest populations in the Hawaiian Islands, but there are also some large populations on the island of Hawaii and also Maui Nui. And these populations are found in the forests in these other islands, but also in the very alpine habitats in the high altitudes. So why I want to support my hypothesis that seabirds are related to ʻŌhiʻa by showing you 2 maps. On the left, we are looking at the distribution of ʻŌhiʻa on Kauaʻi and the current distribution. And on the right side, we are looking at a study that looked into habitat suitability for the ʻaʻo on the island. And this data, habitat suitability, comes from the data that we collect from the currently known burrows on the island. We basically collected information on, what species around these burrows, what is the slope, what are some environmental variables, and then we modeled this based on what we have on the island. And this is what we came up with. And I'm sure you're able to see easily there is almost a perfect overlap for the suitable habitats of ʻŌhiʻa and the ʻŌhiʻa distribution. So you can see how this species is actually dependent completely on ʻŌhiʻa. The ʻuaʻu, on the other hand, has a little bit more restricted distribution on the island. They are mostly, and that's related to certain environmental variables, but their map, habitat suitability map, is still matching with ʻŌhiʻa. And I forgot to mention in the previous map, the darker the area is more suitable for them. That means, so you can see it's more on the core sites of the ʻŌhiʻa distribution, but still all of the sites, when you look at these small distributions, still matching with ʻŌhiʻa. So these seabirds, let's talk a bit more about their life history and how ʻŌhiʻa is supporting them throughout this cycle. They have what I say a slow lifestyle. So they take time to reach maturity, to start breeding. It doesn't happen until the 4 or 5 years once the chick leaves the nest and goes out to the ocean. And on top of it, they also lay a single egg each year. Even when they start nesting, the clutch size, how many chicks they are producing every year is not a high number. It's just a single egg and a single chick. And if that egg is taken by, say, rats in the colonies, we have many rats all around the mountains here, then they don't attempt to lay the second egg in the same season, because you can see in this, hopefully you see my cursor in the same photo, how large the egg is. This takes a lot of resources from the female to make this egg, to produce it, and then also a lot of resources from both parents to incubate it. The incubation takes 2 months. Both female and male shares it. And then the chick, when the chick hatches, the chick rearing also takes 2 months. And in the first 10 days or so, parents are staying with the chick to make sure that it stays alive. That's the most vulnerable stage. And then they slowly leave the chick alone in the burrow, and they just come in cyclic visits and feed the chick until it grows up to this point, nicely, fully feathered, but still has some down feathers on it. And this is the time when they start getting ready to leave the nest themselves. They nest in underground burrows. These two species, you never find them nesting in the open ground like some albatross species, for example, if you know them. These birds are burrowing underground, and their burrows are really deep. That's one of the things, one of the challenges we have when we are monitoring their burrows, but that helps them to avoid from predators in these colonies, and then also helps them raise this chick healthy, because we're talking about wet forest, right? It rains a lot. And then we're also talking about sometimes this forest is exposed to sun a lot. So the conditions are from very wet to extreme hot. So they want to provide this safe burrow to the chick, so the chick grows safely, and that investment is not wasted. In return, seabirds definitely contribute back to the forest. So I mentioned they spend their life out in the ocean mostly, or when I say life, it's like a big chunk of their annual cycle. So when they're feeding on the marine resources on the land, these resources are limited, especially nitrogen and phosphorus, for example. These seabirds bring these nutrients back to the mountains by their poop. So they poop everywhere. The more seabirds we have on the ground, the more nutrients we will have. This is not, this relationship doesn't go positively forever. There are definitely some occasions where when the seabird density increases a lot, they actually change the soil structure and composition. So, it's not always the best, but we are not nowhere there in the Hawaiian Islands. We don't have that many seabirds in the mountains to harm the soil instead of benefiting it. So these seabirds are mostly benefiting the soil, and of course giving it back to not just soil, but all the ground cover, but also the ʻŌhiʻa. So when we are talking about ʻŌhiʻa and seabirds, we're actually talking about a symbiotic relationship, not just one-sided. Yeah, the ʻŌhiʻa is one of the main things ʻŌhiʻa does for these seabirds is it's a safe burrows. As I mentioned, we want this chick to be raised in a safe burrow in terms of temperature fluctuations, in terms of predators, and ʻŌhiʻa roots are perfect places for this. So ʻŌhiʻa roots are not the only exclusive burrows for these seabirds. They also dig their burrows in the soil under uluhe cover, for example. But we mostly, at least for the most, the majority of the burrows that we were able to locate are under ʻŌhiʻas, under ʻŌhiʻa roots. And the reason for that is basically if you consider a burrow dug under the soil, you don't have strong structure to support the walls of that burrow, right? The burrow may or may not collapse easily, depends on how deep they dig or how good of a job they do. But if it's under an ʻŌhiʻa, that root is providing a solid structure for the seabirds, and it's supporting the walls of these burrows. And as you can see in these photos, these are all under or inside the ʻŌhiʻa roots. And you can see like there's a good wall behind the chick that supports this burrow so it doesn't collapse. And these small things are really important because they again they have a single chick and they want to raise this chick as safely as possible. And here you can also see the ʻŌhiʻa. This is already, semi-open burrow. The seabird only needs to go here and start digging deeper, so then they can have the chamber in a deeper section. And they do, it's such a laborious work for them. They do it only by their feet. Which is actually quite strong, but they don't have tools to dig otherwise. They have to do it in the beginning of the season. Or, for example, if a young bird is returning to the colony for the first time, that's what they do. They dig under ʻŌhiʻas or whatever suitable place, and then that will be their burrow. And if possible, they don't change that burrow. They stick to the burrows year and year, but of course, we definitely see some swaps and all sorts of things happening in these colonies. But these burrows also under ʻŌhiʻas also provide the microhabitat that these birds need, cool and dry places. As I mentioned, we're talking about a wet forest, so it rains a lot, and the chick doesn't have really strong thermoregulation if it stays wet all the time. So this is helping to keep the chick dry. We always, when we are checking these burrows in daytime, if it's a sunny day, we know it's really hot in the forest, but when you stick your arm to this burrow, you can really feel that dryness and coolness in the burrow, which is probably, again, the reason that seabirds are choosing these sites. And finally, the canopy protection is also, I think, helping seabirds, especially predator avoidance is something. Obviously, these seabirds evolved under conditions where there are not so many predators on the land, but we definitely had the hawk and the owls for these species during day and at night. And the canopy also, you cannot believe, but sometimes they just land on the trees. They are not the most graceful flyers or walkers on the land. They are perfect in the ocean, but when you see them on the land, it's just, they are so funny. They just crash into ʻŌhiʻas and then slowly come down from the following the trunk or the roots, and then they do the same when they are taking off. Sometimes you have nests under uluhe cover. There is no open space in front of the burrow that they can take off. So what they do is they climb either top of uluhe or top of the ʻŌhiʻas to take off safely. These small things, again, are important because, again, we want these birds to land and take off safely, make everything easy for them to nest, right? So this environment is perfect for them. Another thing ʻŌhiʻa does for them is basically this complex landscape matrix. It's not only ʻŌhiʻa, obviously, it's also weathering and everything else happening on the Hawaiian Islands. But this landscape is perfectly supported by ʻŌhiʻa because it has this skill of stabilizing the slopes with the roots, especially if there are large trees. And this is perfect because seabirds love slopes. As I mentioned, they need the slopes to land and take off easily. Their anatomy doesn't let them to take off easily from a perfectly flat ground. And I will mention at the end of my talk, that's one of the issues we're having with the light pollution in the urban areas. When they are on the ground, they are not able to take off themselves. That's because of their anatomy. They are, again, perfect swimmers in the ocean. Their legs are far back of their body because of that swimming adaptation. But that means on the land, they are really cumbersome. They are really not very skillful. So that slope that's supported by ʻŌhiʻa also helps seabirds to nest in these places. And also, the landscape is so challenging here that at least for some of the predators, the movement of the predators are becoming challenging because thanks to this landscape. And we find more and more seabirds confined to these most difficult to access places because of that. So when I say predators, I'm not talking about cats here. Unfortunately, you find cats in every single location in this landscape. But for example, when it comes to pigs that cannot really climb slope sections, then yeah, we see seabirds limiting their distribution to these higher slope areas and or most difficult to access areas to protect themselves from predators like pigs. All right, these are all the good sides of the story. And the problem we have is rapid ʻŌhiʻa death. And the name implies it's a very fast-acting disease for ʻŌhiʻa. And you know, from the start, I'm trying to highlight that ʻŌhiʻa is our dominant species. Almost everything relies on ʻŌhiʻa in the Hawaiian Islands. And there is this disease just popped up recently, not too long ago. And scientists are still trying to figure out, I believe, what's happening and how we can really manage it. I think we came a really long way since it started. But this is a fungal disease, and this is attacking the trees from inside. So it's not on the bark immediately as soon as it starts, and therefore it takes time to observe that a tree has this disease. And it's unfortunately, again, acting really fast, and the infected trees are dying within weeks. So ʻŌhiʻa is a slow-growing tree. And when you think about, you know, how long it takes to form all these landscapes, all these forests, versus how long it takes to really see the scene, basically, almost all ʻŌhiʻa around dying very quickly because of this disease. It's a very serious threat to our native forest, not just one species, but all the others that depends on ʻŌhiʻas. And it's human vectored, unfortunately. I think Kim can correct me if I'm wrong. There are studies that tested if it's blown by winds, the fungal disease, but as far as I know, there was not convincing proof for it. So it's human vectored. Whenever we go to these places, we unfortunately carry these fungal pathogen with us, with the mud that we have under the boots, or by harming ʻŌhiʻa as well, right? When we are working in these sites, obviously it's a very challenging landscape for us too to move. So one of the things we really pay attention to as the team is biosecurity and not harming ʻŌhiʻa in the field. And we really take serious measures for that. It makes our work much harder, but it's worth it because, again, we shouldn't be adding to this problem. So where we ended up with, I think there's a really, at the beginning, when the rapid ʻŌhiʻa that first detected on the island of Hawaii, the mortality rates were really high, and the state, I think, took really serious measures. This is my personal opinion. Kim can correct me again if I'm wrong, because I'm not an expert on rapid ʻŌhiʻa that. But we took serious measures for biosecurity. It still jumped to the other islands, but I think the spread was at least not super fast. So what we ended up with, okay, we really need to protect what is still healthy in all of the islands, and we should really stop the spread to the other islands that are not infected yet. And for the infected, we have to really start managing it as soon as possible and restore it. Because again, ʻŌhiʻa means life in here. It's not just one species we're talking about. So now I'll show you the same maps of the seabird distribution, habitat suitability, with the overlapping with the rapid ʻŌhiʻa that we have on the island of Kauaʻi. So again, we're looking at, on the larger map, we are looking at the ʻŌhiʻa distribution, and the red and orange dots are all the sites that we identified infected trees. And there are two types of two species that are creating this disease in ʻŌhiʻa. And one of them is much more aggressive, the red dots. The orange is a little bit less aggressive, but still an issue. So if you can see that easily on the map, it's mostly from the edges and the peripheries of the ʻŌhiʻa distribution that we are actually seeing the rapid ʻŌhiʻa on Kauaʻi. There are definitely some internal sites that has the infected trees, but it's still on the edges. And I hope you can relate it easily to human activity because, these are more difficult to access places, and human activity mostly happens in these forest reserves and all these coastal sites, hiking and everything else. So we really need to be strict with our biosecurity measures with the recreational activities, but also natural resource managers should be also implementing strict biosecurity measures when they are going to these sites. And look at the habitat suitability models for seabirds. So especially for the ʻŌhiʻa, they have a wider distribution. So we have it sounds like we have higher chances, but unfortunately the ʻŌhiʻa is the more difficult species to locate the burrows. We have many more uaʻu burrows on the ground located than ʻŌhiʻa. This doesn't mean there are more uaʻu than ʻŌhiʻa. We don't know it. It's just ʻŌhiʻa is harder to find in terms of burrows. And most of the seabird work on the island, the Kauaʻi Endangered Seabirds Recovery Program started in 2006. And since then, we have been investing in finding, locating these colonies and then managing them. Most of our effort has been invested in this teeny tiny northwestern corner of the island. If I show it on the ʻŌhiʻa map, this kind of, free of disease section, because this is the most pristine habitat we have. This is Honoʻonaupali Natural Area Reserve. It's a state land designated purely for conservation purposes. And this is the most pristine habitat, or one of the most pristine habitats we have on the island. And this is where the major seabird colonies are. So most of our work has been focusing here, but since 2020, we have invested all this conservation effort. We learned a lot in the small section of the island. We implemented predator control. We learned from predator control monitoring how quickly seabirds can respond to that. And then we also implemented some predator-proof fencing and anything else related to reducing or removing the threats in this section. And now we're taking that learning since 2020. We have a shift because now there are different teams working in this section. It's there are best practices in place. There are more teams working in this section. Now what my program is doing is we try to go to these other sites that has been unfortunately ignored because of no resources. We are just a small team, so most of the effort was invested in these relatively major colonies. Now we try to go to these, especially eastern side forest reserves and the center of the island, and locate the seabird colonies. And the seabirds are still there. It's we're talking about much smaller populations in comparison to Honoʻonaupali's, but we still find seabirds, and we will definitely start managing these sites as long as we locate more colonies. But that's at least the future of the program, investing more effort in these sites. And I would like to talk a little bit about our approach. We try to learn from seabirds. Here we're looking at a camera photo that we put in front of their burrows, and ʻŌhiʻa preparing and cleaning the burrow in the beginning of the season. And how strong it looks with that, lifting that twig of ʻŌhiʻa, probably trying to clear the area in front. And yeah, we're trying to do that. We're trying to learn from them and implement the same. What we do is basically we're exploring, going to these sites, starting over if needed, go to the new sites, explore, and then relocate the colonies or locate the new colonies, restore whatever threat needs to be eliminated or managed, and then monitor and see what's happening. And then based on that monitor, learn and go back to the circle, beginning of the circle, and start again. When we are exploring new sites, we usually, often you can see us in all sorts of shapes when we are checking the burrows. As I mentioned, the burrows are deep, so we often have to stick our arms into the burrow, and in most of the cases, it's even longer than my arm. We use small cameras to try to photograph what's inside. That's what we do when we go to these colonies. If the burrow is tagged, you can see a small red tag here. Then we check the burrows and record their activity every single year. Occupancy, what's happening, if there's any threat, or if there's any threat around the burrow too, not just inside. But for example, if the invasive species are creeping into the burrows, and we also try to manage them. We do night surveys because these birds are active at night and they are really vocal. We use their vocalizations to listen and count the vocalizations and try to map the activity. And then the next day during daytime, go to these sites, find the burrows. That's how we find the burrows. Basically at night, listen, see where the calls are coming from, go there the next day, try to find the burrows. And this is usually, or people in the field climbing up and down the ropes, and they are doing an amazing work. Once we know where the colonies, where the nests are, we focus around the nest and see what threats are. We usually do it with a monitoring, again, putting cameras out or traps out and see what predators are around, what kind of threats these birds are facing in these areas. And then we try to reduce or remove them. Removing them includes predator-proof fencing, which is tremendously helping ʻŌhiʻa because they are basically excluding almost all predators except the avian predators who can fly in to the site. Any predators that on the land, cats, pigs, deer, rats from the site. So then keeping that inside area really safe. But we also do and when I say we, this is done by multiple partners. It's not just Kauaʻi Endangered Seabird project, but it's also especially the state and Fish and Wildlife and all other partners, private partners working towards protecting the seabirds. And the ungulate fences are not stopping cats or rats to enter these sites, but at least for ʻŌhiʻa, again, really helpful. And ungulates are really destroying these habitats very quickly, so it's also important. When we have ungulate fences, we are able to control the rats and cats with using trap lines. And in the middle photograph, we are looking at one of the traps. These are resetting, automatically resetting, so we don't have to be in the field after every single rat kill, which is a great thing to have because it would take otherwise too much time. And then, as I said, we are also trying to manage invasive plants, especially around the burrows, at least slowing down their spread. And these plants like ginger or guava are habitat modifying plants. Again, when they take over the site, they really form this thick mat that nothing native almost grows underneath the canopy. So yeah, we try to have this understory, but also just basically keep that habitat available for seabirds to come and nest again. And we monitor our progress and learn from that monitoring, as I mentioned. In the colonies, this monitoring involves going and checking these burrows, as I said. And here we're again looking at a deep burrow, nicely, the walls are very nice, nicely structured, and there are some leaves inside carried by the birds. They also use these materials for to like make a little bit chamber, like soft chamber for themselves. And yeah, we see these chicks just newly hatched. You can also see the egg in here. And again, we record this throughout the year until the chick fledges from the nest. And we keep the record of fate of these, every single burrow that we monitor every year. But apart from the breeding sites, we also do radar surveys. If you're living on Kauaʻi or maybe Maui team does the same. Maybe you saw these state trucks mounted with marine, like a ship radar. What we do with this is we have 15 different sites all across the island, and we go to these sites and at night and count the birds coming from the ocean flying to the mountains. And you can see there is a section that we cannot really cover because there is no road that we can go and drive. But for the rest of the island, we are covering the majority of the colonies, and we know the number of seabirds going to these sites, these mountains where ʻŌhiʻa is found, but also seabird distribution. And here, not necessarily we located all of these colonies yet, but we know seabirds are nesting in here also because of the radar, what radar data is showing us. And I will talk about a little bit results. So we started these radar surveys in 1993. Scientists started it with the collaboration with the state. And probably some of you know Hurricane Iniki happened around that time too. And unfortunately, it damaged the majority of the seabird population on the island. And therefore, from 1993, we see a sharp decline in the numbers. And this is the numbers plotted. So every year we go to these 15 sites, collect the systematic data. And when we plot the averages across the island, you see a downward significant trend for both species. Unfortunately, it's still downward because, yeah, the populations were high before the hurricane, and then they went down really bad. But hurricane is not the only reason causes decline. That again, multiple factors are acting together. There were power lines, unfortunately, killing many adult birds, which is kind of almost a solved problem right now on the island. Again, our program invested with the KIUC a lot in finding a really affordable and feasible and easy solution, and it seems like working. If you ever see reflective patches on the power line, these are for seabirds to see them when they are flying at night, and they are perfectly working, simple and working. But there are also predators, there are also light pollution, and any other thing happening in the ocean that we are just starting to explore. You know, we have focused so much on the land with our limited resources, and now we are slowly starting to put tracking devices on these birds and see what's happening out in the ocean. If there is, you know, hopefully in the future, we will have more of these studies, and then we will be able to detect if there's anything happening out at the sea that is limiting their breeding success or survival. One good thing about it, so the previous numbers were plotted from 93 to 23 cumulatively. And if I plot the same numbers, only just get the section between 2010, where we started investing a lot in our conservation effort, especially in the northwestern corner, but also KIUC invested a lot all across the island for the power line minimization, which really helped these seabirds because power lines were killing adult birds. And these seabirds, their population dynamics is such a way that if you take so many adult birds from the population, they decline very quickly. So that's one good news, that when we plot these numbers between where we started investing for conservation and now, the trends is actually kind of stable. So we don't see a decrease in the past 14, 15 years, but we also don't see increase yet. So the goal, of course, to see the recovery, to start seeing these numbers will be increasing with more conservation effort, but we still have a long way to go. But it's still good to see that they are responding very positively to everything that we are doing all around the island, not just one spot. And how you can help us. So these seabirds are in remote places, and unfortunately, we really don't have any chance to take people. I would love to take volunteers to these areas and, you know, do weed management together, do burrow checks together, but these areas are not, unfortunately, suitable for that. We had someone from Jakarta in the group today. I'm sure they can tell, their pilots can tell, like sometimes it's so narrow landing points, and the knife edge ridges that we bulk hike on, and it's impossible to go there all together and do something about these seabirds. But you can do your part if you really want to contribute on seabird conservation. You can do your part in the urban areas, because this is not related to ʻŌhiʻa, but one of the things, I mentioned all this investment in their nesting season, how the single egg is incubated by both parents, how they contribute to raising the chick, and it takes 4 months for this chick to grow and then start leaving the nest. And then once it leaves the nest, unfortunately, the lights we have in these urban areas, artificial lights at night, causes them to get disoriented and end up on the ground. We call this fallout. They basically get disoriented by the lights. They start circling around it until they exhaust themselves and end up on the ground. And as I said, their anatomy is such a way that once they're on the ground, they just stay on the ground. They cannot take off. So then they are easy targets for cats, for cars. And each year, the Save Our Shearwaters program on the island of Kauaʻi receives, I believe, 400 to 500 individuals each year nowadays, recently. So that means if we are not rescuing these seabirds, we're losing this 400 or 500 chicks from the population for nothing, for something that we can really solve. So I invite everyone to spread the word about this, but also help us looking for seabirds on the ground and rescue them and bring them to Save Our Shearwaters program. You can find all this information online. We are in the fallout season now. The fledgling season started in September 15 and it will go until December 15. Mid-October is a particular peak season for the species ʻŌ. And this year, because the moon is not going to be too bright in this peak season, we're expecting many birds on the ground. So we desperately need public help for this. From the ʻŌhiʻa side, what you can do is biosecurity. I think that's the best thing we can do to stop the spread of rapid ʻŌhiʻa death. And we have brushes. I think there's a good awareness about it, but I do think maybe even it's a known fact, people might not be paying great attention because, they don't know how important it is basically, or how small things can really worsen the situation. So I invite everyone, if you're going to natural areas dominated by ʻŌhiʻa, or even like a little bit ʻŌhiʻa distribution, Please, please have the high biosecurity culture, clean your boots, go with the clean gear, do not carry mud between different sites. You can really help. Like yeah, I think a major role on the public for this, because we're talking about both these problems are human related to human activities, so we can stop them. And that's all I have to say. Happy to discuss anything, answer any questions. And here I'm leaving you with a nice Hawaiian Petrel entering or digging the burrow very quickly. And you can definitely support us by following us on social media. We are on Instagram and Facebook. You can visit our website for more information. The website will be updated hopefully soon to better reflect what we are doing. And then you can donate us. We are under the University of Hawaii Foundation. You can just go to their website, and when you're donating, if you select Hawaii Endangered Seabird Recovery Project, we will receive your funding, hopefully to work more in these areas. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dilek, and everybody for being here. Appreciate all the interest, and I've got some questions that are come in. But first of all, I want to say thanks for all the ʻŌhiʻa love and the connection. That is exactly why we do these forest talk stories. Is it's a forest ecosystem, right? Which means that things are in connection with each other and they're not living all on their own in a silo. It's all an ecosystem. It's all connected, like that web of life concept. So I loved the image of I think it was coming out with the ʻŌhiʻa stick, right? Cleaning the burrow. I love the idea of them climbing ʻŌhiʻa to take off. And if you ever get a video of that, because I know you have lots of cameras out, please, please, please share that with me. I want to see it. And also, I want to address the mention of pigs in the forest. You had mentioned the detriment that pigs present to our seabirds, but I will also share that the latest science related to rapid ʻŌhiʻa death, coming out of Hilo, which is where the vast majority of our scientific work takes place, is that we're seeing a strong correlation with the presence of pig in forests to the presence of rod. So the idea, as we all know, pigs dig in the ground, looking for, worms and eating things in the soil and or vegetation in the soil. And by doing that, they wound ʻŌhiʻa. And the only way for ʻŌhiʻa to become infected with this pathogen, the fungal pathogen that Dilek mentioned, is through wounds. So wound pathogen. And so there's a strong correlation to pigs in the forest and rod, again, on Hawaii Island. And then the response to that, as far as mitigation from our standpoint, is that just supports the presence of some of the fencing that's been done in our forests to protect our endangered seabirds, as well as to protect our watersheds so that we all have water to drink. So I wanted to share that since you had mentioned that. And also fascinating, the maps. I have never looked at, I mean, obviously I look at the ʻŌhiʻa forest map and I look at that our rod distribution map, and there's a correlation. But then to see the correlation of the seabird distribution over that, I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? So thank you. Thank you. Those are all my thoughts and response. We have a couple questions I want to get to. And the first one is ʻŌhiʻa related. Thank you, Jerry. Jerry asks, what can we do to improve ʻŌhiʻa? And I feel like you addressed a really important one, and that is biosecurity. So before and after you go into the forest, remove as much mud as possible from your footwear, as well as your gear or truck tires or hiking poles, you name it, because the pathogen does move around in mud. And so the first step is to remove as much mud as possible. The second step is to spray with isopropyl rubbing alcohol. It is the 70% isopropyl rubbing alcohol that will actually kill the fungal pathogen. So two-step process to our biosecurity to improve ʻŌhiʻa. The other thing is to support things like fencing initiatives to protect ʻŌhiʻa. And as well, I love to encourage people to grow ʻŌhiʻa in their yards. So everything we can do to create, because at one time ʻŌhiʻa grew Mauka to Makai, north, south, east, and west on this island. So thank you for that question, Jerry. Jill asks, this is a seabird related question, Dilek, coming to you. Is it common for seabirds to have one egg with long incubation period? And are they also slow to fledge? So I'm
Yes.
assuming she's, specifically related to our endangered seabirds that you work with, Dilek.
Right. It's a great question because the seabird concept, when I talk about seabirds, I often start with describing a seabird because it's not really widely known. And some like coming from again European side of the world, but also I know in the continental United States we have gulls, for example. They are also seabirds.
Mhm.
Shorebirds are also within the seabird family, but some shorebirds like sandpipers, for example. Um, but the seabirds I'm talking about are mostly what I would say procellary forms in the Latin and tube noses in English, I can say, I think. These seabirds are albatrosses, shearwaters, petrels, and they have this life, they share this life history trait. They are long-lived, they have a long lifespan, and I think I will just jump to the next. Jill also asks, what is their lifespan in the case of shearwaters and petrels? There are different studies showing different species. For the Hawaiian Petrel and Newell shearwater, we unfortunately don't have very clear data, but we know from the other species they live 40, 50 years. I think it's hard to give an average because every species is different. But in the case of albatross, for example, we know there is an individual in Midway. Wisdom is, what is it, more than 75 at this point, I think, and is still producing chick every single year. They have long lifespan and they lay a single egg every single year until they die, basically. But it's very common in the tube noses family that they have slow maturity. They reach their maturity very slowly, and then they have this long period. Yeah, from incubation to fledging the chicks, I can say they come in the colonies. In the case of ʻŌhiʻa, for example, they come in the colonies in April. It takes them to lay the egg a month or so, and from May until they fledge in kind of late October. So it's such a long span, such a long investment, and this is very common in seabird species with the tube noses especially.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about our seabird species in Hawaii, and because I know I cannot think of a single species here that lays more than one egg. Because
There is.
is there? Because I know there's like we have red-footed boobies, that
Mhm.
lay one egg. I know we also have brown boobies and mass boobies in Hawaii, and I'm not as familiar with them. So, but I
I
know
think
there's
it's the
other
boobies
boobies,
only.
right? Aren't there other boobies that lay more than one egg? Like I want to say the blue-footed boobies that might lay two eggs or three.
Yeah, the red-footed and brown lays more than one egg.
Oh,
I'm not very familiar with their research. I'm not sure if that both eggs. I know that one chick is surviving,
yeah.
but they lay more than one egg. I think it's kind of a strategy to increase their. I'm not again expert on that family, but I think it's a strategy to increase that chances. I've never seen a nest of a booby on Kauaʻi at least, red-footed or brown with two chicks. So even if they lay more than one egg, a single chick survives. Red the tropic birds lay a single egg, same.
Yep.
I don't know about frigate birds. I imagine they are laying single egg too. And the other petrels like Bulwer's petrel, the storm petrels are all single egg
Yeah.
species.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting question. Um, Lillian asks, is there a healthy petrel population at Queen's Bath? There is a designated area, but no ʻŌhiʻa by those burrows.
We don't have a petrel population at Queen's Bath. We have nearby, not near, extremely nearby, but at the Kilauea Point at Nihoko, we have a restoration project run by the collaboration between Fish and Wildlife, Kauai Endangered Seabird Recovery Project, but mainly Pacific Rim Conservation, another NGO working on seabirds in the Hawaiian Islands. We have some translocated petrels to this colony, and they are coming back in some numbers and they are nesting, I know, but otherwise we don't have Hawaiian petrels nesting around the Queen's Bath. I know there's a big wedge-tail shearwater, ʻŌhiʻa, another shearwater species that is really abundant along the coast and it's often mixed with ʻŌ, and people think, oh, they are everywhere. Why we are concerned about ʻŌ, but it is not the same species. And we also have albatrosses, I know, nesting around. I don't know where exactly, but nesting around that area. But we don't have petrels.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to distinguish is that is more than one species of shearwater, and there's the coastal ones, which more people are familiar with, and they tend to be more abundant, although they unfortunately have as big a threats as our seabirds that are endangered that are nesting in the mountains. So yeah, there's the wedge-tailed shearwater, which unfortunately are, prey to cats and dogs and even vehicles.
Light.
Yeah, and lights, obviously, too, but at least they're a little bit closer to the coast. They don't have to traverse the entire island to get to the ocean, but have as big a threat and don't have as many protective measures. So unfortunately,
No. Yeah,
yeah, and
because it's coming down to status, right? We have some laws protecting like these species that I talked about, the three endangered seabirds are protected under Endangered Species Act. We say listed under Endangered Species Act, whereas ʻŌhiʻa is listed under Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and that is still protected, but it's not as strict protection as the endangered seabirds. Just because they are more numerous, the conservation measures are not as strict, but that doesn't mean these seabirds share the same life history traits. So as I mentioned, they are slow, they lay a single egg, it takes time for them to mature. So if we do our part now along the coastline and protect these colonies as much as possible, then we will not need to worry about them in the future. But if it goes at this pace, I believe it's not going to be too late until they are listed under Endangered Species Act.
yeah, and also private landowners, right?
Yeah.
So they are nesting on private landowners, and some private landowners do more than others to protect them. And I do know of landowners who will fence out, who will fence their wedge-tail shearwater nesting areas to keep dogs and pigs out. It's harder to keep cats out, but some of them will actually even trap for cats too. So it's all about where we place our sense of priorities, right? Okay, I'm going to jump to another question that's somewhat related since we're on this topic. Are band-rumped storm petrels nesting on Kauaʻi? And if so, do you monitor their nests?
They are, and we don't because we don't know where the nests are. So this is a big enigma for anyone working. And the previous, I started KESERP, Kauai Endangered Seabird Recovery Project almost 4 years ago, and the previous coordinator is still living on the island, and he is obsessed with band drums. And I'm sure the previous one before him was also the same. So what's the issue with the band drum trumpetes? We know they are present. We have the data from our acoustic sensors. We put autonomous recording units, sound recorders in the mountains in all parts of the island. And then we analyze the sound data that we collect at night, and we try to detect the species we have in there. And we have consistently band drum trumpeter calls in these data, but they are probably nesting in much more unstable, let's say, or like that crumbly Hononapali cliffs. And I don't know where other site there might be, because we get in really unexpected places, we get calls when we are also doing night surveys. I know they're in Waimea Canyon too, but we could not unfortunately locate a single nest, and it will be very difficult. I studied small storm petrels in the Mediterranean. We have another endemic Mediterranean storm petrel species, and we were studying it on a teeny tiny offshore rocky islet. They were nesting in the boulder scree, and the crevices are so small that I cannot even get my hand in. I don't know where they're. So we had to study them using different techniques. Like we were only banding them by putting mist nets, like huge nets all around the island and capturing them when they are flying into the nest. And through that banding study, that was the most data we can get from them. So we would know, we would put a band on their leg to know their ID. And then we can tell next time we go there if we capture the same individual, if it's still alive, you can get many data from that, like their survival, lifespan, and abundance. But here, even doing that is so hard because these cliffs are mostly not even reachable by hiking. So it's kind of a big problem. We're trying to invest our resources into that, but it's just a slow process. And I don't know when we will be able to really locate. But the conservation dogs, I know someone from conservation dogs is in the talk with us. They are doing amazing job finding their nests in the island of Hawaii, because the habitat is a little bit, it's extremely challenging, but is a little bit more easier to access. It's not at least vertical. And the dogs are amazing locating these birds. They still don't have full access to the nest chamber because these, again, either so deep or narrow, but at least they are able to put a camera in front of the burrow and see, if the birds are going in and out, you can tell if the fledgling is leaving from these cameras. So that's very valuable. I think they are kind of pioneering the nest surveys now, and I'm hoping to work with them in here on Kauaʻi too. Maybe not for bandrams, but for other species.
Ooh, did you hear
Yeah.
that, Yoga? That's exciting. I'm going to jump back to Casey as a question in the chat. Has anyone studied the potential vector for rod posed by the parakeets that have become a terrible problem on Kauaʻi? No. However, a couple things it's a great question. And I like, right? We always have to be thinking outside the box. Um, if the distribution of these parakeets gets into a concentrated number up in the forest, in our ʻŌhiʻa forests, then I would be a little more concerned about it. But also, that question has been posed about birds in general, like forest birds in general. And my colleagues and the scientists on Big Island have looked at that to some extent. And the response is that they're not creating a deep enough wound that penetrates the bark to the vascular system of the tree where the fungus grows. So, but it is definitely something to keep in the back of our minds. And I will say too, on Kauaʻi, we're lucky in the sense that we have not had the vast spread of rod throughout our ʻŌhiʻa forests that Hawaii Island has had and continues to have. Sadly, Hawaii Island is continued to be rod is continuing to move throughout the island and cause problems. Where we have estimated over 1 million trees on Hawaii Island have died of rapid ʻŌhiʻa death. Here on Kauaʻi, we estimate about 1,000, and that's factoring in those that we are not necessarily able to get to because they're in, as Dilek mentioned, some of these precipitous locations that are just not safe for us to send people to, or have a helicopter from Casey's organization land near and get our people to. So, that's my response to Casey's question that's in the chat. William asks in the chat, this is back to you, Dilek. I'm worried about your radar operators getting cancer from exposure to radiation. Can you address that?
Yeah, it's kind of a microwave kind of frequency. We know that when you directly look at it for, I don't know, extended time period, I don't know why someone would do that, but if you do that, then it's not good for your retinas. But as far as we know, there is not a major impact on us. And we are doing it from inside the car or from people around us. And we usually do it on the side of the road anyway, so people just drive by. There is no pedestrians. There are certain places that we do, for example, Hanali, the field near the church, and there are sometimes people playing football. And luckily, they are ending their game by the time I start the radar survey, but we always inform them about it. And if we have people around, we usually just pause the radar, do not operate it until the person asks their questions and then leaves. As far as I know, there's no major impact. I'm honestly, personally not concerned too much about it, given that, how much stuff we use these days, phones, Bluetooth headphones, whatever. But that's a valid question. But as far as we know, there's no major impact.
Yeah, it is a valid question. Thank you for asking that. And then I'm going to jump down to, and I've got 2 more questions in the Q&A, but I'm going to ask one more from the chat, and then we're going to wrap up. But Ariel asks, has there been any acoustic detection of Tristram's storm petrel?
So I will say no, because we're not looking for them. We have sensors on ʻŌhiʻa that we analyze for. So unfortunately, the acoustic data analysis is extremely laborious. You have big data, hours and hours, terabytes and terabytes of data to go through, and we usually we cooperate with other teams to do that, and they use artificial intelligence, machine learning to analyze that data. And we usually limit the number of species that we are looking at to the most relevant species to our management. We have not looked at it. I would argue that there are occasional records, I'm sure, around Kauaʻi, but because we have not looked at it, we don't have it. But we have the data if you're interested, if you want to run the analysis from the start and see.
Okay, and now I'm gonna let's wrap up. We've got two last questions. I'm gonna go in this order. I'm gonna go with Jill's first, and then I want to end with Laura's because it's a wonderful question. Jill asks, if I'm at Kauaʻi at night in October, can I hear these birds? And does a website have the calls recorded?
That's a great question. You can hear the birds up in Kauaʻi. I guess I cannot give you the exact location because they are all around. Not in, it's not going to be in huge density, especially now we are near the end of their all season.
Hmm.
And so what happens in these colonies with the vocal activity is that when they are in the towards the end of incubation, chicks, early chick season, the prospecting birds. So I said that they reach the maturity late, but these young birds that are not starting nesting yet, they still come and visit the colonies, only to maybe land, practice, and see what's around. And they come and circle, fly around, sit on the ground. So they contribute a lot to that vocal activity at the colonies. And then these are the times where you hear them the most. Nowadays, these prospecting young birds that are not nesting are kind of out of the colonies right now, and we have only left with breeders. And the breeders, they still communicate, they still vocalize, but it's not going to be as frequent as the time we have the prospectors. I think you can hear them around that NASA site, for example. I know there are seabirds around it, or even like probably anywhere along the road. And you should just listen after sunset because that's when they come in dark. And we have vocalizations on the website, if I'm right. If not, please send me an email. I'll share them with you, but they should also be online as
Yeah,
well on
it's you
Sana
can
Canto. Yeah, but I'm happy to share them.
absolutely. You could probably find them pretty easily. And I
Uh,
encourage everybody to look for them and listen to them because they are quite dramatic and
yeah.
exotic and yeah, like startling.
Yes, they are.
Yeah,
I put the email of our project in the
right.
chat if you want to contact us.
Perfect. And so let's wrap up with this question that Laura asks. How has the responsibility of working with Hawaiian seabirds and ʻŌhiʻa shaped you, especially coming from a very different part of the world? What have they shown you?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think one thing I can say about this is previously, as I said, I always worked in the cliffs, rocky shores, boulder scree, small rocky offshore islets, and I never had in my mind. We always worked towards protecting the habitat through predator control and light pollution reduction, but I never had in my mind that I would be harming their habitat when I'm walking around this. Because for the cliffs, vertical cliffs, we would rappel down. We would work on the ropes, and it's solid rock. There's not much to shift and move. And here I have this major concern because every step I take in the forest is definitely impacting a species, be it ʻŌhiʻa, be it a snail, be it, any plant species that I don't know yet. So I think it gives me a much deeper perspective in what needs to be done to protect these species, not only isolating the species, but it's the whole habitat and every single small thing in that habitat, but also the complexity of that habitat. It's very amazing for me to learn here, and I continue to learn. I'm so amazed by the methods that we implement here. I think we still have a lot to do, but Hawaii is one of the really good places that is implementing cutting edge conservation measures and also taking care of the environment. So yeah, that's my opinion about, like, I learned a lot. Definitely, it gave me a much deeper perspective on what needs to be protected, not just a single species.
Thank you. Well said. And thank you all for being here, for showing up, because if you're here, that means you care. And we appreciate that. And I just want to point your attention to Linda's note in the chat. We have a new moon coming up on the 21st. So keep an eye out for downed seabirds and get them to SOS on Kauaʻi. Also, a way to get them to SOS is through our fire stations where they have the seabird boxes to put them in overnight. and as well dim your lights at night. So thank you for that reminder, Linda. And again, thank you, Dilek. I'm going to get the recording out probably Monday or Tuesday next week, so you can rewatch parts of it or share it with others. As well, when you click off today, you will get a tab that will pop up with three short questions about today's event. I encourage you to answer those. Just take a couple seconds to do so. That helps us with programming going forward. And as always, support ʻŌhiʻa and our endangered seabirds in any and every way you can. Your voice does matter. So thank you all for being here. Have a great day and a great weekend. Aloha.
Thank you all.